Hi there, this is Brittany from By Brittany Goldwyn. I post videos about plants and projects, and today I actually have a project. Most of the videos I've been posting lately have been about gardening. That's pretty much all I've been doing lately through the summer and fall. But today I'm filming a long overdue tour of one of my favorite projects of all time, my cat tree made out of real branches. I am filming this in November 2024, and I built this tree before we bought our last house, which means 2015. So we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of this DIY project, which honestly, when I first decided I wanted to build it and I made the worst sketch in the world of what I wanted it to look like because I have such a hard time communicating my projects from my head to my husband and my dad, who helped a lot with this project because at the time we lived in an apartment. The drawing was awful, but honestly, it ended up looking a lot like the end product, and the end product has obviously lasted quite a few years, coming up on the 10-year anniversary. There are no cats on it right now. The cats are both sleeping in our bed because I had off work today and I took a nap with them, and they did not move because they do not like to move. But most of the time, one of them is sleeping on here, the other one is sleeping on here, and they fight for supremacy on the top spot. These cats spend hours and hours and hours every day on this tree in our sunny sunroom, and I get lots of questions about this. This is one of those projects that I definitely regret not doing video for when I did it, but like I was not filming videos 10 years ago when I was doing my projects. I do have a blog post on my website that walks through all of the instructions and steps. I'll have a link to that below, and I'll also put some of the pictures from the process up while I'm talking through the cat tree and just giving you guys a closer look at how it's constructed and some tips that I might change for next time. So let's start our cat tree tour. Okay, so we'll start with the big view here, and we'll start by talking about the branches first, because that's one of the questions I get all the time about this tree is, how do you know what types of branches to use? How do you know how long to let them dry out? All of that stuff. I wrote a separate post about that, and then I actually have a video that I'll put up here, a link to, about how to make a tree branch plant hanger. And the process is essentially the same for drying and finishing the branch. Now, you don't have to finish the branches. I decided to give these like a very light natural stain and then to seal them with a matte water-based urethane so that they would have a very natural look. But for my tree branch plant hanger, I did a darker stain with a more semi-gloss urethane. So it's a little bit different of a look. Whatever you're going for is totally personal preference. Now, to choose these branches, I wish I had a better story, but I literally just went into the woods behind my parents' house and looked around for branches. I looked around for branches that had already fallen because I knew I did not want to take anything off of an existing tree. One, because that's not very nice to the tree, and two, because if it had already fallen off the tree, I thought that there was a better chance that it would be a little bit drier than if I were cutting a fresh piece of wood. Of course, there's no telling exactly how long these branches had been on the ground when we drug them out of the woods, but I mean, they seemed pretty dry because some of the bark was flaking off and there were some cracks in the branches already. So I got both of these branches from the same area. So we have this main one, and I was specifically looking for something with kind of a Y at the top. So I did get pretty lucky finding that one. And then this other one, I wanted something smaller, and I got lucky that it has like a little piece on the side that kind of helps to balance the platform as well. So once I got these branches, I drug them back inside into a room with baseboard heating, which if you've ever been around baseboard heating, you know it's super duper dry. And then I let them sit for a couple months, which is a good excuse to procrastinate and work on other projects and kind of try and think through some of the logistics of building this tree. But I wanted to make sure the branches were super, super dry before I started working on them. Then once I felt like the branches were dry enough, I decided it was time to remove the bark. That's another question I get a lot. Why did you remove the bark? Do I have to remove the bark? So as a branch dries and dies, the bark is probably going to fall off. I'd say almost certainly. I mean, I'm not familiar with every single species of tree, but most of the trees that I've encountered, when there are limbs or pieces of the tree that fall off or cut off and die, the bark is eventually going to separate from that tree. So you want to remove the bark for a couple reasons. One, it's going to fall off in the future probably. Two, there could be bugs living under it. Now, I feel kind of bad saying that because obviously dragging a branch out of the woods is taking a bug's home away probably. But I feel like I do enough in response to taking one of their homes to create other homes so that I could have this branch to create a cat tree. But I did want to make sure I removed the bark so that I had a clean product I was working with, and so I knew that what I had would last. Now, some types of bark, it's super easy to remove it. The branch that I removed the bark from for my tree branch plant hanger, it was super easy to remove that bark. I think I used mostly by hand and like a little chisel, but then I also used the paint scraper for some of the more challenging areas where the bark did not want to come off. These branches, however, were a massive pain to remove the bark from. I do not know what type of tree they're from. I wish I did, but I don't. The bark was really, really hard to remove from the trees. I had to scrape each area of the bark with a paint scraper. It was the best thing I could find at the time. I have since learned that there is another tool that I can't think of right now, but some other people have recommended to me. So I will either throw a picture of that up here or the words of what it's called for you. I have not personally used this tool, but I have heard of other people having success removing bark from branches using this tool. So I used a paint scraper. I went through a couple different blades. I got the majority of the bark off, and then I sanded by hand. I used a pretty low grit sandpaper. I think it was like a 150-ish to sand by hand on the branches to get the remaining uneven areas of bark off and to just get kind of like a smoother surface. After I was done that, I sanded with a finer grit sandpaper, I think like a 220, just to polish it up a little bit and get rid of any like snaggly areas. And then it was time to start cutting and finishing these. So to cut these, I would say this was the biggest hurdle that we encountered because they're branches, right? It's not like a piece of wood that's straight and straight enough and that you can just pop under a saw and chop off the ends. So what we did to cut these is we did this in my dad's shop. So this was before the tree, the branches were attached to the base. It was before we had even built the base. So what we did was stand the branches up and just kind of eyeball where to get that straight cut on the bottom. We did the bottoms first. We cut them completely straight so that we knew that they would sit flush on a piece of plywood. And then we just kind of toyed around with the angles that they had once we blunt cut the bottom and set them down. So sometimes we would blunt cut the bottom and set the branch down and it would be leaning too much this way. So we'd go back and we cut it a little bit more at an angle. And we did just use miter saw for this. So for the tops though, once we had the bottoms flush and we attached those to the base, which I'll walk through in a few minutes, we had to work on the tops. Now we did attach the pieces to the base and then we cut the tops, which is kind of backwards, but we felt like we needed to get a really stable surface so we could use a laser level, and figure out where that exact level surface was with a pencil up here. And then we could take that and cut it off as cleanly as possible. So since I mentioned the base, let's talk a little bit about the base. The base is made of 3/4 inch plywood with, I think it's 1 by 4. You don't have to have an enclosed platform, but when I made this, it was almost 10 years ago and my cats were very young, so they were much, much, much more active. So I wanted something that was a really stable base for them. They were insane. They were like climbing things, running around, hanging from things, just being absolute menaces. So I wanted something that was very stable. And that meant I wanted to put some pavers and some large rocks into the bottom of the tree. To do that, I took a piece of 3/4 inch plywood and then I built a frame around it. The frame just has mitered edges like a picture frame, and then I attached it all with wood glue and nails. And then that just creates an enclosed area where I could put a couple large pavers to really weigh the tree down so they didn't get too crazy when they were playing on it, and some large rocks. Once I had the frame built, I think I stained and finished the frame before we started working on the branches here. I honestly can't remember because it's been like 10 years, but No, the branches were already stained and finished at this point, and then we attached them to the base. So once we had the branches stained and finished and attached to the base, which was stained and finished, it was time to start working on the platforms. Now, we did add 2 dowels in the front and the back. You can see these are not supported by branches. These are just, I think, 1 inch, 1, 2, whatever the largest dowel size I could get at Home Depot was. So we had these as our 2 main pieces. And then we had the 2 dowels. So to make sure everything was super stable, because it obviously doesn't have, I mean, it does move around a little bit. You can see there's some wiggle on this. The way we attached all 4 of these pieces was to put the base up on, why can't I think of what they're called? Sawhorses. So we could access the bottom of the base. So we were working to attach all of these posts by drilling up through the bottom of the base. So what we did is, this is obviously a 2-person job. So we placed the branches, we put them in place, and then we put some liquid nails on to put it in place, and then someone holds it in place firmly while the other person goes underneath of the base and drills a very long screw up through the top. I don't remember what size screws we used, but we used the longest screws we could find so we could ensure that we get the most stability possible for each of these branches. So that's how we attached all 4 of these pieces. Once all 4 of these pieces were attached, it was time for us to start working on the platforms. Now, there are a couple things that I would do differently now if I were making this tree, and this just comes from years of use, a couple other people seeing my tutorial and making some of their own versions, which I will throw pictures of up here. It makes me so happy when someone sees one of my projects and they decide to make a version of their own. It makes me even happier when I like their versions better than mine, which is the case sometimes with some of the trees I've seen. But one of the things someone recommended was, instead of just relying on the screw up through the bottom of the tall piece and then screwing the platform to the top of the branches, is to, when you screw in this piece, wherever you're putting your tree, make sure that the placement allows the back of this piece to be flush with a wall that's behind it. So obviously that's not going to be the case for us here because it's up against a window, and we built this 2 houses ago anyway. So we could have done that and it might not even work in the situation we're in now. But I thought this was a very smart idea, because what that then means you can do is further stabilize this top panel, and this one too, if you want to put this one back flush with the wall or a side wall, using L brackets. So you would just drill the L bracket into the bottom of the platform and then the other side into the wall. So you could drill it into a stud, you could use anchors just to make sure it's super secure, because again, this has always had just a little bit of a wobble here. It has never bothered us or the cats, and obviously this is still hanging on tough about 10 years later. But I would say that is something to keep in mind if you're thinking about making a tree, especially the higher this gets. I'm almost 6 feet tall, and you can see this is about my height. That's a pretty tall tree, so that's going to be a lot of sway on this without an anchor, depending on how you are attaching it on the base. So for our platforms, this one is just a piece of scrap plywood with some faux fur wrapped around it and stapled on the bottom. And then this one is more, it has like a little raised edge around it because I just thought my cats would like that. A little raised edge, so essentially a smaller version of the frame on the bottom. Right now I have like a little rug from IKEA thrown up here. I used to have a piece of cutout faux fur fabric that matched this, but it just got disgusting over the years because this is the one that they use the most. And like, if you've ever washed faux fur, a lot of times, you know, it just kind of loses its comfiness and it starts looking a little nasty over time. So that's what happened here. So this little IKEA rug has been a perfect solution because I can just grab it and throw it in the wash. I can vacuum it. That is one change that I would make for this one. I cannot take this piece off because it is stapled on using a handheld staple gun. So I can go on and I can vacuum it and I can use my little Green Machine carpet cleaner to clean it, which I've done, but I can't take it off. So when the day comes that just needs replaced, I will probably try to come up with a solution that's a little bit friendlier to just grabbing something and throwing it in the wash. That will still be comfortable for the kitties because they have really enjoyed the fabrics that are on here. Okay, next let's talk about the faux vines I have on this tree. A very controversial topic. I have received some of the meanest comments I've ever received on the internet. And I've received a lot of mean comments on my website. Some of the meanest comments I've ever received about what a terrible cat owner I am, how I must hate my cats, how I must have a death wish for my cats, how I'm feeding my cats plastic. Like, it's just insane. Yes, I have faux vines on here. I have had these faux vines on here since the cats were kittens. Again, they're like 11, 12 now. I've had this for 10 years. I put the faux vines on just because I thought it looked a little naked without them. It looked a little bit too rustic for me. And honestly, they will eat leafy real plants. So if I were to put something on here, like we're in my sunroom, so I've got a lot of plants in here, but I know what types of plants I can and cannot have around my cats. One of my cats does not have any teeth. She is not interested in plants at all. She is lazy, she sleeps, she gums on things occasionally, but she leaves plants alone. That's Blanche. It's Henry that I'm really concerned about. He's the one who will eat like ferny things. If I had like a real potted ivy on here, he would tear it up. I just know he would. And I don't want him eating that. Even if a plant is non-toxic to cats and I had it on here, I still don't want him eating it because it probably just means he's gonna throw it up and then it's gonna look gross because he's chewing pieces off of it all the time. They do not bother, these faux vines. They're not interested in them at all. So for me, this was a very good solution. I can also take these off. They do kind of gather dust. I take them off and like rinse them and dry them out, maybe like every couple years, to be honest with you. But they don't bother them at all. Sometimes they like batted around with them when they were kittens, but this has been a good solution for me and my cats. If your cats are going to eat like fake plastic vines, if you know that they're little hellions like that, do not use it, please. Cats eat the most random things. Don't use it if you don't trust your cat. So that's what I have to say about that. It's been fine for us. If it's not fine for your cats, please don't do it. The tree will look lovely without the fake vines on it. Or get something else to decorate it with, like maybe some little string lights, which we have decorated this for Christmas before with Christmas lights, which is really fun to do with my young daughter. She loves that as well because it's technically a tree, so it's the Christmas cat tree. So that's it on the vines. I do have, there's like a little piece back here that I'll show you a clip of just like a branch sticking out of the back of this tall branch. And I put a little feather cat toy on that. And they played with this a lot more when they were younger, when they played more and didn't just sleep all day. But I still occasionally will see them like jump up and bat around at this, which is extremely cute. And I love seeing my old babies playing. So let's talk a little bit about the scratchers down here. Obviously, you can tell that one of my cats is a big scratcher. This is just completely torn up, way overdue for an update here. They don't scratch the one on the back as much, probably because it is not as accessible, but they do scratch it a little bit. And to make these scratching posts, all I did was stain the dowels to match the base, so they blend in a little bit more seamlessly. And then I used jute or sisal rope. It can be either of the two. I find that sisal is a little bit like crunchier for the cats. They like that a little bit better and it stands up a little bit better than jute rope would. This is jute rope and this has only lasted about a year. So what I do is I use a handheld staple gun. I staple the very top, so up here, staple that in place, and then I run glue all down the posts and then I just wrap the rope very tightly around the dowel until I get to the bottom, glue it in place, staple it to hold it, and then once the glue is dry, and this is very important, I remove those top and bottom staples. Those are only there to keep the rope in place as the glue is drying. You don't want your cat's nails to get caught in that, obviously. So you want to remove those once the glue is dry. But that just helps keep things all neat and tidy while you're wrapping it around super tight to make sure there are no gaps. Now, we have had to redo this sisal rope. I think we've redone this one like 3 or 4 times over the years. So what I do to do that is I just come down here, I find the start of it, and then I just slowly unwrap it, throw it away, and then repeat the process, which is a little bit more cumbersome when I am like down on the ground working with it instead of just working with a dowel before you attach it to the base. But like I said, one of my girls is a huge scratcher, so it is well worth it for us to be replacing this rope whenever we need to, every couple of years, so that she has a fresh surface to get her scritches in on. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the stability of the tree and some things that we've had to do over the years. Actually, only one thing we've had to do over the years to update the tree and make it a little bit more stable as it ages. So we moved into this house about 3 years ago. Before that, this cat tree has gone through a total of 2 or 3 moves with like movers, so big moves, not like room to room. I'm talking like moving truck, movers moving it in and out, like not super, easy moves, right? So when we moved here, it had been through 1 or 2 moves already. So what we did was we noticed that the bottom on, where is it? It was this one right here. So this one was getting a little bit loose, and you can see that it actually is a little loose again here. So we need to add a little nail in here. We noticed that this one was loose and this piece was unattached from, you can actually see there is a small branch under here supporting this. So what we did was we took everything out, we put it up on something so we could access the bottom, and we took this out. We redid the sisal while we had it off, which was super convenient, and then we just re-glued and re-screwed this piece on with a tighter new screw and some fresh glue, and then we put this piece back on and then glued and nailed it in place here. Actually, I don't think we nailed it, which is why it's moving. I think I just used liquid nails, and like that just has not held up for the last 3 years. So right now what I need to do is really just drive 1 nail down through the top of this platform into the branch, and then that one will be stable again. All right, that was my tour of one of my favorite DIY projects of all time, my cat tree made out of real branches. It is a beautiful tree. I love it, and I hope this project inspires you to do something similar for your babies. My babies have loved it, and I mean, it is just it has been so great to share this project with people over the years, other cat lovers and other makers who want to make something special for their cats that also looks beautiful in their homes, beautiful and interesting and sparks conversation, but also makes them feel really good about the project. Because let me tell you what, there is nothing better than seeing a cat tree you really like online for like $1,400, and that was in 10 years ago money. Seeing a cat tree you love online and saying, no, I think instead I'm gonna go into the woods and drag out some branches and make one myself. That's the start of every good project. Some bad projects too, but thankfully this was a good project. And like I said, it has held up incredibly well. We have gotten so much use of this tree over the years from my babies. And yeah, I hope that if you want to make your own tree, something along these lines, that this has shed a little bit more light on the process. Again, I did a full tutorial post on this about 10 years ago on my website when I first did the project and I wasn't making videos back then. So I will link that below. I'll link a couple more sources that I think will be helpful also. Yeah, so if you have any questions about my tree, please drop them in the comments below. And until then, I hope you enjoy your brainstorming about your own cat tree. Bye-bye.